Okay. So, for anyone who's joining us live this evening, welcome. It's lovely to have you with us. Please do post any comments or questions if you'd like to as we go along, and we can look at those at the end. But we're just going to have about a half an hour chat. And it's a real joy to have Alex join us this evening. Alex, thank you so much for agreeing to talk firsthand about a topic that's still very much often hidden in the shadows, and for helping us to bring it to light, because I think it's something that we don't often want to talk about or share. But I think once you've been through the dark times and you've come out the other side, it somehow makes it easier to then become to share your wisdom. So welcome, Alex.
Thank you.
Alex, would you like to share your story with us? Can you tell us about your journey with addiction?
Yeah. So I was kind of born into a very ordinary working class family. There was no obvious addiction, we don't think, in the family. My mum was from a large family. My nan liked a Guinness, from my Uncle John would pop over, he'd bring a bottle of light out with him, and but no real heavy drinking or stuff really. One of the uncles was a bit of a boozer, apparently, Uncle George, but I wasn't really exposed to that. So I had a pretty ordinary childhood. And then when I was 7, my parents split up, and it was quite unusual in those days for that to happen. So we felt very different, and I know my mum kind of felt this sense of guilt and shame about it, because your marriage vows were for life and all that sort of stuff back in those days. And I kind of think we carried that a certain extent, and I remember my teacher used to say to me, "Where's your dad?" And I felt so self-conscious and bad about it. I was always quite a self-conscious kid anyway, that I used to lie and say, "Oh, he's at the office," and I didn't like, because I wanted to deceive her. I lied really to make myself feel better. And I figured that, because I kind of suffered from low self-esteem, I guess, and I wasn't particularly popular. I didn't think I was particularly popular at school and that sort of thing. And I found that sort of lying about things like having a chopper bike or a Scalextric set, things I didn't have, a dog, kind of made me feel a bit better and made me feel like I might have been a bit more accepted. And it just, it changed the way I felt, basically. I didn't know any of this till many, many years later. I didn't really connect all this stuff together. But that's kind of, to me, telling lies, living in a bit of this fantasy world was one of my first mind-altering addictions, if you like. And I got to the age of about 14 and discovered booze, like kids did, I suppose, and felt that made me feel the same as everybody, you know what I mean, and part of something. And I discovered weed, and that had the same effect. I kind of went through my 20s. I stopped drinking at the age of 20 because I'd had a sort of allergic reaction to beer. So I was basically just smoking weed and dropping a bit of acid or whatever, but just, they weren't very heavy drugs, but I was taking it quite frequently. Because I needed something to make myself feel less self-conscious, really, less kind of awkward.
So it freed you. It kind of gave you a feeling of just being more connected or free, confident.
Yeah, basically. I didn't like the way I felt inside, basically. My default setting was to be irritable and restless, I feel a bit disconnected from people, either not good enough or too good, so I was the kind of person I could lay in the gutter and look down on people. Do you know what I mean? It was, I could, that. And drinking the drugs, they just made me feel a bit okay, sort of thing. And I got through to the end of the 1980s. Ecstasy turned up, and that was the first sort of class A drug that I started to take. Brilliant. I just thought it was the answer to mankind's problems, really. It was I really enjoyed it. Really felt part of something. And around that time I started drinking alcohol again. And I started drinking quite heavily. and drinking at work, you know, because I always needed something to take the edge off of life, if you like. And, you know, you couldn't go and smoke weed at work, not the sort of job that I had. But booze was acceptable, and so was cocaine. It was kind of the environment I was in. I was on the fringes of companies, working closely with agencies who were creative, and, you know, it was kind of almost accepted in there, you know. And I kind of got into taking cocaine, and smoking weed and doing ecstasy and, you know, drinking heavily. And my life just carried on like that without me really thinking, questioning things too much about whether it was normal or healthy or doing me any harm. You know, I guess I got through to my sort of late 30s, where I had a kind of moment of realization, which didn't really stick with me long enough to make me want to change, you know. But I kind of, I was doing doing a deal with some agency. There's a load of blokes who worked for an agency, and they were all sort of 30-something lads, you know, blah blah blah. On Tuesday night, 7 o'clock in their office, and working late wasn't unusual for me, because I kind of, you know, a lot of the work I used to do was like events and stuff like that as well. Anyway, I'm kind of there, and you know, they're doing this working late, and someone said, anyone fancy a beer afterwards? So I'm like, yeah, great, you know, let's go, sort of thing. And we went out, and these blokes had a beer, literally one, and then they all went home. Right. And I'm sitting there thinking, where are they going?
What's this? Yeah.
Well, because to me, going out for a beer meant staying out till like closing time. You know what I mean? And then crawling home at like 1 o'clock, 2 in the morning, pissed. You know, trying to get some sleep and get yourself up the next day. Yeah. You know, and it's the first time where I thought, oh, maybe I'm a bit different, because like all of my mates used to drink and use like I did. You know, we all did it. So that was a bit of an eye opener, but not enough really to make me really question stuff.
Because I suppose you had other friends that were also in your environment, so you could just carry on with them and think, oh, I'm not that dissimilar, not that.
I've surrounded myself with people who drank and used like I did. Yeah. Really.
To normalise it.
Yeah, exactly. So I never really felt it was a bit odd. This was the first time I'd really stopped to question it, to be honest. So I kind of got, you know, a few years later really, and I had a few moments of clarity. You know, I had I had a swollen foot, basically. I had an ankle problem, and I was going to the doctors with it, and I'd left the bandage on all night, so my toes were quite swollen up. Yeah. Even though I was going for an ankle problem, I had sort of swollen toes by the time I got to the doctor. So the doctors looked and said, you know, I don't like the look of your foot, sort of thing. So I explained the situation. He said, well, nevertheless, we'll take a blood test and just make sure. And they took a blood test. And when I went back, they said, you know, yeah, they thought it might be gout. That was the thing. They said, no, it's not gout. I said, but you do have enlarged platelets. And I said, like, what does that mean?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and the doctor, and the doctor said, how much do you drink? And I said, I don't drink very much, you know. I started rattling off how many bottles of wine I drank. I mean, I used to take, you know, go out for lunch and drink a bottle of wine, sometimes more than a bottle of wine, you know, have a few beers afterwards or smoke some weed, you know what I mean? So I was always on something really. By this stage, I was drinking most lunchtimes.
So was that when we worked together? Was that time?
Yeah, around that time, probably a bit after that. I mean, but when we worked together, that was sowing the seed. That was when I was kind of, you know, quite heavily drinking. But before I'd really come to that point of realization. So yeah. So I was working in the same company, but a slightly different role by that stage. Anyway, so the other point of realization happened around the same time, that my colleague sat me down and said that she couldn't work with me any longer.
Right.
And I said, oh, why? And she said, well, basically because you're a bit of an arsehole. like you're very unreliable, you know, you disappear at lunchtime, you don't come back, or if you come back you're pissed, and like you sniff a lot and blow, you know, because I was doing coke in the afternoons as well at this stage. And you know, and she just sort of painted this picture of someone that I didn't recognise. Fucking hell, that can't be. And you know, sure, and she was like, and I depended on her, to be honest, because I was only there in the mornings, you know. And so I said, well, I promise you I'll stop doing it at work. And I basically lasted till the Friday, you know, and couldn't just had to go and get something at lunchtime, get some drink or drug or whatever at lunchtime. And at that point I thought, fuck, you really have got a problem, you know. There's a realisation the penny absolutely dropped then. So I took myself to a local, not a local rehab, it's like a day program.
So that was the turning point, that bombshell.
That was the turning point, yeah. It was that, basically. Just not when she said about it, but when I realised that when I tried to stop, I couldn't. Because, you know, I'm kind of quite a capable person. And normally if I put my mind to something, I can do it, you know, or make a reasonable job of it. But I just completely failed. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go or how to deal with it. So I took myself to the local day program. I used to live in East London. I still live in East London, but this is in like Hackney, Clapton. And it was this right rough old building, it's an old Sally Army building. And in the basement, they had the program. And they sat me in this room, which was like paint peeling off the wall. And there's all these posters up for heroin, crack, needles and veins and all that. And I was thinking, well, I ain't got a problem because I don't do any of that. I didn't inject anything, or, you know. And I thought, I can't really be an addict because I'm not injected. Because in my mind, what an addict was somebody who kind of injects or is taking crack or is stealing or is, you know,
all very underhand and
homeless on the street, etc. You know, and I was a respectable business person in a suit, you know, blah, blah, blah. Not that any of that makes any fucking difference is what I've learned, but nevertheless. So anyway, the bloke's come in, he sort of had a chat with me and he said, right, I want you to come in to do a 6-week program with us. And I said, I can't. So I've got a full-on job. I can't just take 6 weeks off. I said, I can't do it. You know, the stress levels will be too much for me, worrying about what's going on apart from anything else. So he said, all right. So in that case, come back once a week for, he said, what I want you to do, he said, I want you to find Cocaine Anonymous, which is like an AA type group for people who do multiple drugs as well as drink. And he said, go to there and basically just follow a program with them, ask them for help, they will help you, which they did. And I'll come on to that. He said, but I want you to come in twice a week, once for an hour's counselling with him. He was a trainee counsellor, fancies himself a bit as a trained counsellor. I said, fine, yeah, I'll do that. Maybe I was a good guinea pig. And he said, no, I want you to come in once a week as well on a separate day to have your saliva swabbed. So I said, fine. So what do you want my saliva for? And he said, because I want to tell you if you're telling me lies or not. And I got really offended. I said, well, fuck you. I said, what are you talking to me like I'm some kind of an addict? And he said, well, you are. And I said, well, I'm not, you know, I don't sort of, you know, inject myself in a bin cupboard or any of that sort of stuff. Do you know what I mean? Because I'm not a street user. And he said, I know. He said, but that's not what addiction is. And for the first time, somebody explained to me what addiction really was. And it's not your circumstances. It's not whether you're in a penthouse or whether you're in the gutter. It is when I take a drink or a drug. He said, can you easily stop? And I thought, no, I can't. You know, once I'm up and running, that's it. One is too many and 100's not enough. Sort of thing. He said, basically, you know, do you get a craving for more? Yes. He said, do you think about it a lot? I said, yeah. He said, that's it. That is addiction. That's basically what addiction is. It's not your circumstances. And some people can have all of this, have this kind of irritability, restlessness that addicts have the craving and the kind of the mental obsession about it. They can have all of that and not take drink or drugs or not take, you know, or look for anything else to change the way they feel. And they're lucky. But I did. I used to take drinking drugs, and a lot of people do, or they go gambling, or they get into sex addiction, or food, or there's an awful lot of ways of changing the way you feel. But that's basically what it was. He explained it to me really clearly. But once he explained it, I thought, fuck, I never realised that. I didn't realise that was what it was about.
So you mentioned, so we had a brief chat beforehand, and you mentioned about it's quite a lonely thing when you're doing those drugs, and you somehow feel that you're the only one. So even though you could do it in a social situation, you don't share what you're doing openly with others.
No.
And then you came on to realizing that actually I'm not alone here. There are loads of people in the same boat.
Yeah. So there's two elements really. First of all, when I was doing it, I'd go out with all my mates. They would like a drink and a sniff and all that, go down to football and get on it, And I'd be the one going like, right, I'll have a line now. And then I'll be thinking, right, how long can it be before I have another one without it looking a bit suspicious, without them noticing that I'm doing it a bit much? So I'm kind of already in my head and getting just really self-conscious rather than just enjoying the sociable thing. So there's a clue. Eventually I used to sort of drink and use on my own, because couldn't be bothered with other people. It was all they wanted was my coke. You know what I mean? There's all this paranoid stuff going on about fuck and that. So you end up doing it on your own a lot. So that's quite a lonely existence, what it can be. And when you're with other people, you don't really feel part of connecting to them. I certainly didn't anyway. It was more like, fuck you, I just want to get on my own and get on with it.
So it's isolating.
And
paranoia sets in.
Can do. With me, paranoia was kind of a little bit, maybe that's too strong a word for it, but do you know what I mean? But it was going along that way of everyone knows, do you know what I mean? I'd go to my dealers and I'd basically pick up some drugs, and then I'd be standing by the door of the tube in case the police came on with sniffer dogs. Do you know what I mean? That's not normal behaviour. That is something's not quite right. And basically when I got to Cocaine Anonymous, I found a lot of people who basically had the same experience that I had, where it starts off as a sort of sociable thing. It ends up as being the party for one, and then it's out of control sort of thing. And then you're kind of doing it on a daily, but rather than just a weekend thing, the weekend stretches into the week, and then it's every day of the week, and so on and so forth. And if I can't get drugs, I'll take a load of drink. And if I can't get drink, I'll do a load of drugs. But I'll always look for something, And the people describing their experience, and it was the same as mine. And I thought, fuck, thank God for that. I thought I was the only one that did it like that. I didn't realise that is quite common, really, and that a lot of people are like that. And I wasn't the only one. And it was this massive relief to know that I wasn't alone. Really, that's the best thing about it, and although I am different and special, I wasn't that bloody different and special from anyone else, which was great. And also that, in that place they had an answer. There were people who were happy, they were smiling and joking and laughing, and there are people telling the most, harrowing stories, but still there was this kind of gallows humour of recognition, going, I used to do that, blimey, so it was like a camaraderie there, which I'd never really experienced before. It was quite amazing.
So what do you think the answer was there? Was it feeling you felt part of something, you felt understood, you felt there was a way you could move forward or out of this? What was obviously explained the turning point that led you to get help, but then what was the bit that took you out of addiction?
Right, okay, so basically I got to a CA meeting. I heard people laughing, joking, telling a story like mine. They then started talking about God, because the Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous programs, they're spiritual programs. They're not religious, but because the whole thing was written in the 1930s, the AA program, which is what everyone uses, they mention the word God a lot. I mean, had they been Buddhists, they won't have mentioned, you know, Buddha or prana or chi, you know. But it's, anyway, it put me off, and I was like, well, you know, this is a cult. I don't care. I don't want to go to it. And like at the end of the first meeting I went to, I was going to just go and not come back because of this God thing. And this woman just came up to me. She's the one who met me at the front door and said, "Come in, mate. Come in. You know, you're welcome. Go and get a cup of tea," sort of thing. So I was hanging around outside, not really sure. Yeah. And at the end of it, she just gave me a hug and said, "See you next week." I was like, "Fuck!" I mean, I absolutely started. I burst into tears, and I really couldn't. Everything come out. It was like, Jesus. I don't really understand what it was, but it's the real power there. There's something very powerful happened. You know, I think it was just that kind of act of selfless kindness off of somebody, you know, directed towards me. It was like, because I felt kind of worthless at this stage. I really felt I didn't deserve any of this stuff because of the way I treated people and the way I treated myself and whatever. You know, this is the problem when your thinking is unchecked. You know, you end up doing it. Yeah. So that was the moment where suddenly I felt hope. You know, and I thought, God, there's something here. You know, I'm going to ignore their God thing. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to go and just try and learn some stuff, you know. And the bloke at the recovery centre who'd sent me there said, stay open-minded. You might hear some stuff that sounds a bit odd, you know, a bit alien to you, you know, about loving people or about being open or honest, or because I wasn't a dishonest person, but, you know, I used to fantasize a lot, and I didn't really want people to know the real me because I didn't like that, you know. So, but I had to try and I had to learn all of these different things. And so that was the starting point. And then, you know, with the AA, and this is only one way of getting over addiction, but it worked for me, and I would recommend it. It's the 12, it's called the 12-step program, and it's the basic AA program, but they can adapt it for cocaine, drugs, heroin and crack, or, you know what I mean? They adapt it.
Make it more specific.
Yeah. And it's really about, first of all, recognizing that I was powerless over the drugs. I thought, and you think about it, I didn't spend all that fucking money sort of, you know, going down sort of dodgy pubs, doing sort of dodgy sniff off of some toilet seat because I wanted to. I did it because I had to, you know, and I had to recognise I was powerless over the drink and the drugs, and that my life had become unmanageable. Now, when my sponsor told me that, the guy who took me through the work told me I'm manageable. I thought, well, there's nothing unmanageable about my life. You know, I've got a job, I've got money in the bank, I've got debt, you know, I've got relationship, property, you know what I mean? I had all the things when you on the outside, you think, oh, they're doing all right for themselves, you know, they got all this sort of. And but he said, but that's not unmanageable. He said, well, what do you do about your feelings, your emotions? And I just went, I don't know. I don't know what my emotions are. He said, that's what they mean by unmanageable. So, you know, my emotional state had gone unmanageable. That I would get angry about stuff. I had no idea what I was getting angry about. I used to get angry all the fucking time, or jealous, or, do you know what I mean? Or feeling awkward. And I never had really a vocabulary to express all of that. Anyway, so that's kind of big turning point for me, was recognizing I'm powerless, I'm unmanageable, I'm either happy. I mean, you know, someone said, how are you? I'd either be I'm all right, would be the standard answer. You know, I couldn't tell you. I could tell you if I was happy or sad, but I couldn't tell you if I was feeling awkward or conflicted or emotional. You know, I couldn't really do that.
Pinpoint the emotion. Identify.
I didn't have a clue. Just, you know, I'm all right. You know, that's all right. You know, get away. It's really saying, go away. I'm all right. Just leave me alone.
Yeah.
You know, and don't get close. Anyway, so then there's a program of work, basically. The biggest part of that for me was about the part of it is about trying to connect spiritually to the universe or to God or to other people, just to connect something greater than yourself. And I'd already had that because I used to do Tai Chi, which is a martial art. I still do Tai Chi, which is a martial art. So I kind of understood this power thing. I didn't see it in the same way that Western religions see it. I see it more of an Eastern thing, but a physical energy sort of thing, but a connectedness anyway. So I got that, and that didn't stop me becoming an addict, frankly. That really didn't stop help me at all in that time. What really helped, though, was first of all to recognise that there's a power there that I can tap into, but then to actually do this process, which helped me to understand first of all, the reason I took drugs was to change the way I feel. Yeah, that's it. I would tell you it was because Tottenham Hotspurs won, or because Tottenham Hotspurs lost, or because it was a sunny day, or because it was a rainy day, or any number of reasons. But actually, it was all about I wouldn't feel very good, and the drinking drugs would just make me feel, it would temporarily take me out of myself and just make me feel a bit better. If I was the sort of person that could have a couple of drinks and just sit the sweet spot and enjoy life and go to bed at 10:30, that would be fine. But I wasn't, because I have this kind of craving that says I want more and I have to get more, you know. So what the process showed me, or the program showed me, was that reasons why I was getting angry. What was those emotions that I was getting overwhelmed with? I didn't realise I was getting overwhelmed with emotions, but I was. Because I thought that's normal. I just thought that's what everyone's like, because I'd always been like it, but actually it wasn't. And it showed me how to change the way I feel differently. It showed me how to process emotion differently. And I never knew how to do that. You know, all I knew was I don't feel well, drinking drugs, that makes me feel better. You know, that's what I got to.
That's an answer. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it was an answer, but unfortunately it was a solution.
Very destructive.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, someone said to me once that, you know, I said, they said, what do you think your problems are? With problems, coke, with problems, booze. And I said, no, that's your answer. Your problem is you. Your problem is the way that I related to the world. That was my problem. The way I reacted to the world was my problem. And the drink and the drugs will make me feel better. So actually, that was my answer, but it wasn't a healthy answer. And what the program showed me was how to actually manage my emotional state a lot more healthily, you know. And that was the biggest part. That was the biggest piece of learning. And then from that, I kind of managed to adopt a different set of values. Like suddenly, instead of ducking and diving and keeping people away and lying, you know, that became the wrong thing to do, because all those things would stress me up anyway, you know. And just being open and try to be understanding. And if someone crossed me, rather than get really angry with them and want to tear their head off, is just try and forgive them, you know. And it was a reverse of all the things that I was like. It was interesting.
So it kind of cracked you open and showed you a different way to deal with life.
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah.
Exactly. A different way to react.
So what was really interesting for me there was you talking about processing emotions. They taught you that there was a way to identify and process these emotions that you'd been suppressing for so long that you just didn't know how to identify with or to manage. And I think, you know, we're sharing here with men, for men, and I think for your generation and probably those who are, I don't know, maybe 30 and above now, haven't had the kind of role models that have been able to show how to deal with emotions. I mean, I loved my dad dearly. He was great. He was able to model how to work hard, how to be successful, how to achieve, but he wasn't able to model, and I think for my brothers, he wasn't able to model how to deal with emotion, because he was taught on the day that his mum died, don't ever talk about that, we don't go there again, by his dad. So we need to be shown, and this program showed you how to do that.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is, I think for a lot of our guys here, the fear is so great about going to that painful place or exploring those emotions that feel so alien. What would you say about that? You know, where does the pain lie? Is it more painful to deal with the emotion, or is it more painful to hold it down, to suppress it?
Pain, I mean, the pain didn't come from dealing with it. The pain didn't come from looking at this. And the reason is because all of that stuff that I've been holding inside me all those years, I knew it was there. I knew it was there. I knew what it was. I just didn't want to face it, but it was still doing its damage, you know? And then the time that I actually got it out and looked at it with the help of somebody who knew what I was doing, and there's a process to show me what it was that I was dealing with, you know, because and what it was that I was scared of. because ultimately that's the thing. I used to get angry all the fucking time, and that wasn't that is basically fear based. That's it. The anger is a reaction to fear. Now, people said to me, "You're fearful." I'd say, "Fuck off! I ain't scared of nothing," you know. But actually, I was scared of failure, and I was scared of not being good enough, you know. And all of these things were given to me through trauma when I was younger. And resisting it was the painful part. You know, as soon as I got it all out and started looking at it and just process it in quite a methodical way, really, just look at it and go, fuck, is that it? Do you know what I mean? All of that stuff was years ago. I mean, a lot of my trauma was from when my parents split up. My dad left, we all felt abandoned and isolated and lonely. And, you know, that's not as traumatic as a lot of people had, but it was traumatic enough for me, to be honest. And I had to learn to forgive him. I hated the bastard. I used to blame him for every fucking thing that went wrong in my life. You know, 40 years after he fucked off, and I was still blaming him. Do you know what I mean? I couldn't even recognise the bloke if I tripped over him. You know, so I had to think, well, why would he do that? And then I had to learn to forgiveness. This is one of the things that I had to learn. You know, it's like a bit of compassion. Like, he didn't do that because he wanted to. No human being would. He did it because he felt that was the best thing to do. You know, probably he was wrong, but you know, nevertheless, that was the reason. That I had to understand that really and just let go of that anger. And, you know, it feels very kind of difficult at the beginning, but actually, you know, there are ways to work through that. There are people that all over the place that can guide you on this sort of stuff. And it's like a weight lifted off your shoulders. It's just amazing once you get that little bit of clarity and breakthrough, you know, how quickly my life changed, my attitudes changed, my responses to things changed. I didn't want the drugs. I didn't feel bad anymore. I didn't want to change the way I felt. I was really happy the way I felt, you know, and that was purely and simply because instead of having all this repressed kind of stuff I've been putting down and, you know, basically my reactions to a lot of things were about that fear of being abandoned and the fear of being lonely and isolated. And just
repeating and playing out over and over in different ways.
I found when I was 7 years old, getting angry about it helped me. And when I was 9 years old, I was still doing the same. And when I was 20 years old, and 30 years old, and 40 years old, I was still doing the same because I'd never really learned how to do anything differently. But once I learned how to do it differently, like my life changed amazingly. You know? And they promise you in these programs you'll get a life beyond your wildest dreams, you know, which I thought was a Fitbird and an Aston Martin, to be honest. But it's not. It's not. It's like, frankly, it's the one thing that my dealer didn't have for sale, which is peace of mind. That's what I got, you know, and I will guarantee anybody out there who's struggling with addiction, you know, when you get underneath it, that is really what you're looking for. And the dealers can't sell it to you, but these simple programs, you know, can. And it's, you know, I always say to people, you know, if they're struggling, give it a go.
Get help, basically. You can't do it on your own.
No, get help. I mean, go to a 12-step, in my opinion, you know, my experience, go to a 12-step program or go to somewhere, go to your local doctor will point you to somewhere that will say, this is where you can go to get help with addiction. And then throw yourself into it. You know, don't be an arrogant person like I was and thinking, I mean, when I first went, I said, I don't want to come here for 6 fucking weeks. I said, what are they going to do? Teach me how to write a CV? I didn't have a fucking clue what they were going to, you know what I mean?
No.
You know, just go into it with an open mind. And if someone said to me, you know, if you put as much effort into going to meetings and going to recovery as you put into going and finding your drugs, and you know, if my dealer wasn't open, I would go to the other side of London to get some. Do you know what I mean?
You'd go wherever you needed to go.
And if I put that much effort into recovery, you know, you get there. And you get there really well. And I say the life beyond your wildest dreams is that, it's peace of mind, you know.
And that's the ultimate foundation, isn't it, for anything great, is to come to peace, and then everything good can follow on from there.
And don't feel the shame. I mean, you know, a lot of my life was guilt and shame, you know, and I'll go and I'll use up and I feel really guilty about that, and I feel terrible for the things I did and blah, blah, blah. Well, you know what? Fuck it. You know, I mean, with addiction, what I learned was I was struggling with an illness that I didn't even know I had.
Yeah.
I didn't even know I had it. I didn't know I was addicted, you know? So all of my actions were they were a symptom of that.
Yes, and it is an illness. It's so important that we say that as well. You know, it's a powerless illness. It is, and it's nothing to be ashamed of.
Well, it's not your fault.
No.
You know, I mean,
you know,
however you get it, whether you reach a tipping point and then you tip into it, whether you was born like it, you know, whether you caught it off someone on a bus. I mean, none of that matters.
No.
The only question to ask yourself is, what am I going to do about it? Because you're the only person that can do something about it. That's the real thing. No one else can make you better. If I could magically sprinkle everybody, you know, suffering with addiction with some magic powder and make them better, I'd be a billionaire. But I can't
You'd
do
be dealing it.
Exactly. I'll be dealing peace of mind. But I can't, you know, we can't. But everyone's got it in their own power to do it. And it's about taking control of your own life. And you'd be amazed how easy that is once we approach things with an open mind and a bit of effort.
Yeah, and there's certainly an element of surrender. There has to be surrender to something, doesn't there? Something other than our ego self.
Well, it's about that. It's about losing the ego. It's about humility. It's about surrendering to the fact that, you know, it's acceptance. I was out of control. My emotional state was out of control. I was powerless against drink and drugs. No other human being seemed to be able to help me, no matter what I tried to do. I couldn't work it out, you know. So then I had to kind of try and get this kind of spiritual connection. It's meditation for me. It's just meditation, stillness, you know. It's that you know.
Did that come through the program, Alex, the meditation? Was that something that was recommended? No.
Well, it is something that the program recommends, yes. But actually, I've been meditating for years. But, you know, I was doing it and I was finding a level of serenity off of it, but I just wasn't really. The program showed me how to go deeper and deeper into it, you know. And it's about trying to stop the chatter, or just try and put the chatter where it belongs and not listen to it, you know. I think the danger for people like us is that we believe we are our thoughts, and that's it, and we're so much more than that.
Absolutely.
But, you know,
well, if we can start using the mind as a helpful tool, you know, that's where we need to get to, isn't it? So that we can use the mind for useful things as opposed to just completely taking us over.
Yeah, well, direct your thinking, basically. If I put my thoughts to something, then it is a very powerful tool. I always think, because the part of the program is about surrendering to the universe or the higher power or to God or whatever you want to call it. And I had struggled with that. I thought, what the fuck does that even mean? You know, what I've come to is to recognise that my brain has got two distinct parts. There's the bit that thinks, and there's the bit that knows. And there's a bit that kind of will think, and it will bring in all my prejudices, my insecurities. He thinks I'm this, she thinks
so it's judgment of self and others.
That's the thinking part. Then there's that bit of my brain that I always go to the back here, this bit of my brain at the back which just knows the right thing to do. And if I can just stop the chatter, tune into the bit that knows, that's my spiritual self, I call it now. I make no apologies for saying that. You know, I feel that's my spiritual connection, and follow that, and then I can use my thinking brain to actually follow that path. You know, and that's kind of quite a good way of describing it.
There's a discernment there.
Definitely.
And that comes from wisdom and knowing.
And also just a recognition that this thinking brain, unless I'm telling it what to think about, it will come up with all sorts of shit, frankly. And I've got a brain that will tell me lies. You know, I've got a brain that will tell me that, you know, if I'm going for a wash-up meeting with my director because my work is shit, and do you know what I mean? And I'm about to get to say, my brain will tell me, go and have a few drinks and a line of coke, that'll sort you out before your meeting. Do you know what I mean? That's what my best thinking tells me, you know. Whereas the bit of my brain is going, no, don't do that. That's a really shit idea, you know. And so to follow that,
Okay. So to close, we can kind of summarize by saying, get help, basically. If you're in this place where you cannot stop thinking about getting drugs, getting drink, if you're powerless, then it's not abnormal. There are so many people who suffer in the same way. It's not your fault.
No.
There's help and support there for you. That help and support has been working for thousands of people.
Millions.
And there are so many people that can help you. And then when you come through the other side of that with a new way of thinking, a new way of being, a new way of living, you can then go on to help others do the same.
Well, that's a really important part of the 12-step process. You know, that there are 3 maintenance steps at the end of it, steps 10, 11 and 12. I mean, I won't go too much into it, but step 10 is to constantly check your thinking, to make sure that, you know, the inventory process that I've been taught, which will get me to just check on, you know, I'm thinking this, I don't feel very good. Is that my pride telling me stuff? Is it, you know what I mean? Is it dysfunctional? What's the truth here? So that's one of it. The step 11 is about just maintaining that spiritual connection through meditation, really. They say prayer and meditation. I mean, to me, it's all the same thing. It's just either talking or listening to the universe, really. Maybe I'm just programming my subconscious. I don't bloody know, but it's, you know, it's there.
It's working. Yeah.
And then 12th step is, you know, having had the change in your mind, is then to work with others and help others. So if somebody reaches out to you as an addict, you're struggling, you're going to a meeting and someone says, give me your phone number, I want to check in with you, let me buy you a cup of tea, you know, they're not after anything. What they're after is keeping themselves clean and sober. Because that's how that program works. That's how the 12-step program works. Like I said, there are other programs as well out there. I don't know much about them, but there's other stuff as well. And if the 12-step program doesn't work, or you go to an AA or CA meeting or an NA meeting or any anonymous meeting and it doesn't work for you, go to another one, try another one, because somewhere you'll connect with people who can. And actually the meetings don't keep you clean and sober. The meetings are about connecting you with other people so you can share experience. But what will normally happen is that somebody will, or you can ask somebody, that's the best thing, if they will help you. And nobody in an AA meeting will say no. To you. So, you know, but it's so
that's an interesting point as well, because you may go along to a meeting and think, oh, this isn't for me, or I didn't particularly connect with any one person, but go try another one, because there may just be a different environment that you really click with.
I went to an AA meeting about 2 years before I got sober or clean, and I went to an AA meeting. I'd ruined my partner's birthday by getting so fucking pissed. Do you know what I mean? I was like, I couldn't really remember what I'd done, but I just felt terrible. And I said, I think I've got a drink problem. She found me. I went to an AA meeting anyway. And I thought, well, I don't relate to this. They're all talking about pissing the bed and, you know, drinking a bottle of wine before they leave the house in the morning. And I was thinking, well, I don't do that. I don't drink until midday. I can't be an alky. You know what I mean? But when I found a Cocaine Anonymous meeting with people who drank and used drugs like I did, it was like, fuck, I really get it now. You know, so keep going. And, you know, don't give up. No. I mean, that's one of the things that, one of the principles, they call them spiritual principles. You know, I had to learn honesty. I had to learn self-awareness. You know, I had to learn forgiveness and tolerance and patience, all these things I never used to do. But one of the things that I learned was perseverance. Just keep going.
Keep going. Okay. So if anybody watches this and resonates and thinks, do you know what, I think actually I could explore this, or I think there might be some answers there for me, they can get in touch with you or I through this group, and that's could be a great first start. They could get in touch with me. Anyone can get in touch with me at any time. Just filter them through, or you know, just go on the website and look for a Cocaine Anonymous meeting or an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting if you're a drinker, or if you're into more narcotics, a Narcotics Anonymous meeting.
you know, there'll be meetings in your area. I mean, I can
And
certainly
they're all
help.
listed online, aren't they? There's
Yeah,
loads
they've
of
all got
them happening every
websites.
day. Yeah.
Yeah, every day of the week, and
Mm.
there's lots going on Zoom at the moment as well. So, you know, and as I say, the worst thing that ever happened to me at a CA meeting was I got, you know, a stale biscuit or a bad cup of tea. That was, you know what I mean? Nothing bad ever happened there.
Yeah,
You know,
that's
they're
so
good
great to hear.
places, and yeah.
Mm. Alex, thanks so much for sharing.
Pleasure.
If anyone has any questions, I don't think many people are watching live, but if anyone has any questions and just want to post afterwards, and we can answer any questions you may have, or if you relate in any way, we're here to help. So Alex, thanks so much for sharing your wisdom with us, and
Pleasure.
I'm so pleased that you have now found that peace of mind that you've always been craving. It's wonderful.
Exactly, yeah. Thank you.
Thanks,
Jo.
Alex. Take
Lovely.
care now.
Best of luck.
Lots of love. Yeah.
See ya.
Take care.